In Galatians 4 verse 1 to 3, Paul comes and he basically explains that the Jew and the Gentile are both bound under sin, and that they are equally in bondage, doesn't matter what. Even if God has, or when God has made you a promise, if you are an heir, although you are an heir, if you are under tutors and governors, you differ nothing from a slave. And he's got, like I said in the introduction, he comes with his concern now. And the concern is not about, well, just customs and just, well, they follow the customs of the Jews and we just don't believe we don't have to do that and all those kind of things. No. What Paul's concern here is the power that is behind what you do. Because if you go back to the old law system, you will not have the power of freedom from sin and death. That is what he is after here. He's not after, well, we can just incorporate people that are going back to Judaism and being circumcised. It is okay. No, it's not okay for Paul. This is a life and death matter to him. Let us read Galatians 4 verse 1 to 3. It says, now I say that the heir, as long as what is a child, differs nothing from a servant or a slave, though he be the Lord of all, but is under tutors and governors until the appointed time of the Father. Even so, when we were children, were in bondage under the elements of the world. So what he is saying here is that if you look at the Jews, when they were under the law, they were in bondage to the elements of this world. So there is no freedom under the law. That is what Paul is getting at. We also see now in the beginning of chapter 5, he actually comes and he says, stand fast therefore in the liberty wherewith you have been set free. That liberty is not a liberty where it is saying, well, don't be under a law. The liberty he's talking about is to be liberated from sin and death. And that we see as we continue up into chapter 5. All this is building up to Paul saying to the people, you are going back to a life which is a cursed life, which is a life that doesn't have the power unto salvation, which is a life wherein the pride of ethnicity and that which comes with circumcision becomes central stage, where it's not about Christ but about a nation, where it's not about Christ but about a certain custom, about the flesh, if you're circumcised in the flesh and what you do through the flesh. And that life is void of the power unto salvation. That is what he's getting at here. He says in verse 3, even so we, when we were children, were in bondage under the elements of this world. And there we can look at two verses. The one is John 8:36 and the other Romans 8 verse 14 to 17. Now I'm going to read, there will not be a slide on the screen for you for this one, but John 8 there will be a slide. I just want to read Romans 3:9 here. It says, what then? Are we better than they? No, in no ways. For we have before proved that both Jew and Gentile, that they are all under sin. So what he is saying here is that there is a bondage when you're under the law. You are in bondage unto sin, and that you cannot be set free from it. You might say, but how do you get Romans 3 verse 9 into this whole thing about Jew and Gentile all be under all under sin? I connect it to Galatians 4 verse 3 where it says, even so we, when we were children, were in bondage under the elements of the world. I connected that passage because of John 8:31. Now let us just read John 8 verse 31 to 36. It says, then said Jesus to those Jews which believe on him, if you continue in my word, then are you my disciples indeed, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. They answered him, we be Abraham's seed, and we never in bondage to any man. How do you say, you shall be made free? Jesus answered them, Verily, verily, I say unto you, whosoever commits sin is the servant of sin, or the slave of sin. And the servant abides not in the house forever, but the Son abides forever. If the Son therefore shall make you free, you shall be free indeed. Now, I do believe that Paul had the same mindset about bondage unto sin as what Jesus declares here. Jesus comes to the Jewish people and he says to them, listen, you will know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Now, I believe that truth that he's talking about is the resurrection. He says, if you continue to be my disciples, if you continue to follow my teaching, then you are truly my disciples. And as you continue in what I teach you, you will find the truth. And the truth would be that Jesus is truly the Messiah of the whole world, and that he has conquered sin and death, and that it is not about ethnicity, but it's about God coming, conquering the sin and death of people by the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. That the Messiah actually came for sin, to condemn sin in the flesh. That is what he has come to do, so that we might have immortality by him ruling over sin and death, and not ruling over nations. That is what he's talking about here, I believe. That's why he says here that you will know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Then he goes on. Then the disciples go on, or the people that were his disciples then, or the people that started to listen to him there, and they said, but we are Abraham's seed. Now we know when these Jews said that we are Abraham's seed and we've never been in bondage, that what Paul is saying in Galatians and what these Jews saying is not the same thing. Paul said that the seed of Abraham is one, and whosoever is in him, those are heirs. And he's actually saying that physical Israel as a nation is not the heirs of the promise. But those, although they be from physical Israel or any nation, they do believe that they are the heirs of the promise. And the promise is that the nation shall be blessed with a life free from sin and having, therefore, immortality because of the doing of God. He goes on here and he explains that this bondage is actually this bondage is unto each one that is under sin. That's what he is saying. So the bondage by Jesus is declared as a bondage to a life of sin and death. And here Paul comes and he says, as long as what the heir is a child, he differs nothing from a servant. He differs nothing from a servant. And what he's saying is that the law does nothing for you as pertaining to setting you free from sin. As a matter of fact, Paul says that he has not known sin, but by the law. That is what he is saying. And by the law we find a manifestation of more and more sins. We see that in Galatians. We have taught on that in previous chapters here, in previous lessons. So what Paul is saying is that as long as what you are under the law, you are still in bondage under the elements of this world, under the basic principles of this world. You will stay in bondage. You will not be set free from what destroys your lives. And that is a great concern to the Apostle Paul, and he wants people to be set free. He's saying to the Galatians, you think that you have believed upon the Lord, you've received the Holy Spirit. After that you have received the Holy Spirit, your life started to become new, and now you're going to be made perfect or have even better holiness or immortality or whatever you think the promise of God is by going back to the old Judaism system of circumcision and the customs of Moses. He says, no, it's not going to go better with you there. It's going to go worse, because that has no power unto salvation. He goes so far as to say, you will be a slave and remain a slave. Well, I think Paul is really warning the people here, and his heart is being seen. And may this be a warning to all of us as well. Now that was Galatians 4, verse 1 to 3.